Okay, hopefully everybody can see us. Mr. Silas, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome, awesome. Mr. Denis, wave to everybody. Mr. Boris, I guess, is not joining in the fun with the video. All right.
Mr. Boris don't like video.
All right, well, hopefully everybody can see the video. We're gonna get started here shortly. Just a few administrative things to take care of first. Today, first and foremost, welcome to the Great Ideas webinar session, the Balalaika Edition. For those who don't know, it's a triangular, weird shaped instrument that people like to play in Russia, folk music in particular. So pretty neat little instrument. But anyway, today we have 3 different subjects that we're gonna, it's not weird, you're weird. Yes, Juan, thank you. We're gonna cover 3 different topics today. The first is gonna be our sort of fireside chat. Today, myself and Silas will be discussing some topics in the news recently. And then we're gonna move on to Mr. Denis Legezo, and he's gonna cover some interesting little tips and tricks when doing some analysis on some more recent wild pressure malware, as well as maybe some other samples. And then finally, we're going to have Mr. Boris Larin, and he's going to do a workshop on some exploit development, or not development, analysis type stuff, show you some of his black magic that he does here on a daily basis. So, and then afterwards, we'll have a Q&A session if we have time. But the biggest thing is, please, during the talks, feel free to throw questions in the Q&A. It's easier if they pop in as under the Q&A button on Zoom, I guess, versus just the chat. But I'll try to monitor all that, and then maybe ask some questions at the end of each speaker, or during, depending on how important it is. You know, if Dave chimes in with some interesting questions, of course, we're going to answer them. So anyway, so for now, if Mr. Denis, you could turn your video off, and Silas and I believe, are going to start. Silas, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, and yeah, for those who don't know, Silas works for now CrowdStrike, previously CrowdStrike, actually Dell, I guess, way back in the day.
Back in the day.
And CrowdStrike, and then not CrowdStrike, and then back to CrowdStrike. So I think you went over to Chronicle for a little bit there with Juan.
Yep.
But yeah, so Silas and I go pretty far back, and I figure we're going to talk a little bit about some exploit stuff today. And I think Silas has some really interesting insight into some of the background. He's been around the block a few times and understands the community a little bit more. So might be an interesting conversation. So welcome, Silas. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. So yeah, you know, we were going to talk a lot about exploits and different fun things around that topic. But first, obviously, you know, the big news of the week, of course, this crap drops over the weekend when it's Saturday night and we're all enjoying our beers and whatnot. But the Colonial pipeline stuff, right? So we have to at least talk about this a little bit. I'm curious on your take. I think a lot of us that maybe aren't CrowdStrike customers would like to know maybe what you guys think, or what you personally think about the incident. If you have any sort of information to kind of share with everybody else on the call today, it would be now's the time to bring it up. So
yeah, absolutely.
Stage is yours on that one.
So all right, so let's kick it off with this, because we got to talk about this. And it's a big topic. So I guess the kind of like best place to start is, so from my understanding of things so far, like we track DarkSide under Carbon Spider, Fin7. ITG 14 and Carbonac stuff. So trying to map out the names for everyone as well. This is a group that's been doing it a long time. They're doing it as ransomware as a service. You buy the ransomware kit from them, you use it as you need, they get a cut of the profits. They're a software development shop. They're doing this as a business. So my personal view on it, I'm not sure what everyone else's is at this point. I've tended to take the take dark side based on the word of what they posted on their Tor blog that they have for
the press release or whatever.
Yep, I generally tend to take them at their word for it for a couple of specific reasons. Like first, like especially in the ransomware business, like there is a pretty important thing about trying to stay honest, because like if you're asking for multiple millions of dollars, you've got to kind of stick to your word when it comes to like, we will unlock your stuff.
Right.
But second, also like the target that was hit, like from the understanding of what I've heard in public, like it was their billing system that was hit, not anything operational. And if they were looking to like knock things out, I suspect we could have seen like what we saw in Ukraine in like 2016, like right around the holiday where the power got knocked out in Kiev. And in that case, like they went after stuff to disrupt. I mean, going after a billing system, that's cutting off their revenue source. That's not cutting off operations. And it also kind of has this like, you don't get paid until we get paid, which fits like a ransomware app. So someone.
Well, do you think, I mean, I read the press release and they were pretty adamant. They dumped out a press release on like May 10th. And they basically said, look, we're apolitical, you know, whether we all believe that or not. Obviously, it's probably a little bit of bullshit there. But, you know, they say we're apolitical. We really don't have any sort of control. They kind of hinted to the fact that this was done by potentially an affiliate versus themselves, which I tend to believe. Question is, what affiliate? I don't know. But they said they're putting in some extra checks or moderations to try to avoid, you know, taking down things like this in the future. Now, granted, their press releases in the past have also said we're not going to target healthcare and all this other stuff. And needless to say, you know, you can't really trust the word of a criminal, obviously. But it is an interesting business model to me, is this affiliate program that they have. And then really the culpability here, obviously, you know, they're going to be held accountable and responsible for what happened. But the bigger question I have is, in the press recently, people have been talking, you hear over and over, you know, Russia, 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 right? And of course, there's lots of things happening right now. But really, if you take a step back, there's calls for example, governments to be held accountable for the operations of a potential criminal group, whether they're complicit or not, or they just turn the other cheek. My question is for you, do you think that governments maybe should be held accountable one way or the other for, you know, say a criminal group like this that's operating supposedly out of that region? I'm not really sure. What's your thought?
So this is like an age-old problem that we've had for well beyond like the current cyber age, if you will. Like, but look, we've had this issue in the past with things like extraditing people for various crimes, and there is a line that I don't know if it's defined or how it's looked at, but at a certain point, there's like when someone is intentionally causing damage and intentionally committing crimes in a foreign country and using another country as a safe haven to avoid prosecution, like at a certain point, like there is an aiding and abetting that another country is doing for that type of activity. And the minute it moves to that level, it becomes a hugely hot topic political game, and gets way out of my pay grade.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it is a touchy subject, but it's definitely something that at least myself watching the press coverage and the media and everything, and, you know, calls for accountability. And of course, someone has to be held accountable. And it's like, well, ultimately, who, you know, and it brings into the question about this affiliate stuff too. Like, are they the ones that should be held accountable? If we can figure out who that is as well, is there sort of a shared responsibility here? You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but it's a really interesting topic to maybe spawn some conversations in the future with folks. So
yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'll say just one of the things that I would really like to see, and something that's that's been weighing on my mind as I've thought about this as well is, you know, if DarkSide says that they're not going to hit hospitals and they're not going to hit specific targets, they kind of need to make good on doing something about it when it happens. And either that's releasing decryption keys and kind of being like, hey, our bad, let's walk away. Like, but and they may have already done that. I'm not sure. I haven't checked news on stuff, but essentially,
well, I will say, when asked, I think yesterday, I believe they asked the press secretary about, did they pay a ransom? Did Colonial pay a ransom? And then they said, well, we'll defer to Colonial. And then Colonial, I believe, has not answered that question. So, you know, and I don't know what happened.
Yeah. So the thing is so I've got a pretty hard thing about this. And like, at least with Colonial, like I feel really bad. Like they're in a bad spot. And I'm really glad I'm not sitting in that seat. And I do hope I really am. So I saw the job posting that came up a couple weeks ago.
They're hiring, yeah.
And I'm so happy to see that. And the thing is there's been some really great cases where like there have been breaches and like really top talent people move into those roles and really help set like ship right. And so like I'm really optimistic and hopeful about that. So
yeah. Well, here's to hoping. So it's going to happen again somewhere else, I'm sure. And we'll be talking about the next incident. But anyway, I really want to get into the meat of our conversation that we were wanting to talk about today. But I just, we had to touch on that just because I know folks were asking. So I really want to talk today about the tremendous uptick in the last, I would say, 6 months, even the beginning part of 2021, of 0 days being reported. And specifically, I mean, we're talking, when you see a patch Tuesday from Microsoft come out with, 100 vulnerabilities or whatever, it's insane the amount of stuff that is being reported recently, or at least being found and patched. And a lot of these are not shabby days, right? They're being reported as being used in the wild. To me, my perception, and I think a lot of others out there, is that there's a huge increase in the amount of days that are floating around. So the question that I would have for you is, do you think maybe there's a root cause for this? Maybe it's a combination of a couple different things. To me, maybe some folks are doing better at discovering these in the wild. Maybe they're actively hunting them more. I know Project Zero has been kicking ass and taking names when it comes to that stuff, especially in the last few months, since the fall at least. Or do you think maybe there's more availability or an easier way to obtain them? For example, brokers. What's your thoughts on what might explain this huge uptick in days recently?
So I think it's definitely a couple of factors. So I think one of the things that I see driving a piece of this is I feel like generally in the exploit world, I see, in mind you also, like I see a lot of exploits and stuff on the defensive side, like in triaging them. So, and the like vulnerability work is mainly like hobby fun stuff. But so the thing is also, like, I feel like, especially in the vulnerability world, one of the things I see quite often is sort of like trends where, someone will find something and like a really, really great exploit or a really great chain in a product, and it'll inspire others to also want to take a look at it and see what else is there. And I mean, we do this with like malware research all the time, where like someone will put out a report and then like everyone else will sort of pile on, rerunning through the analysis, seeing if there was things that were missed, and like try to break new ground in that area and see what they have to contribute as well. And I think over the past at least couple of years, there's been some distinct things that have been leading to a lot more fires when these things happen. So I think first there's been a bit of centralization, like some of the, I saw a lot of things on Twitter a few weeks ago, like during the exchange activity, where people were saying like, I don't know why anyone would self-host their own mail server anymore. Like, and from experience, like it is a brutal pain in the ass to do. And it's problematic. And it's also so much easier to use cloud services to do it. But again, you lose some control when you do that.
Right.
But again, like there's not a lot, like there's not as many different options out there for when you're running and using your own mail software. So makes sense that like Exchange suddenly becomes a much bigger target. And when somebody starts going after Exchange and then more people start piling on, we're going to see more exploits with it.
Yeah. Well, and that was evident. that was not to cut you off a little bit, but that was evident. I think the U.S. government, I think NSA actually, after the original Exchange stuff came out, they went back and I believe the next patch cycle, there were ones reported by them in Exchange as well. So,
oh, nice.
You know, I mean, it's a good example of, you know, people go looking for this stuff and maybe find other things. I know in our case, we ended up discovering some other stuff after tracking a specific broker, right? So we have, you know, a couple different exploit brokers that we have been or are kind of keeping an eye on. And then some news came out about one of their exploits and a specific APT actor that was using it. We went looking for that. And just because we were looking for that, we ended up latching on and finding some other stuff, right? So then we end up reporting that. So in that instance, you know, it's just a kind of an accidental discovery because we're looking for things, right? So,
and actually, so Project Zero also like noted in one of their blog posts, like, so the one blog post I talked about, like remote code execution, I think it was through Bluetooth in iOS, like the author of it made a very casual side footnote that like they had like made a tweet about something or commented, and a like known exploit analysis broker service from Australia like had commented on it and picked it up and was likely also pursuing the same research because they knew like P0 was running down this area.
Right.
So
yeah.
like, and I think also just as well, I think as well, like COVID plays a role in this as well. Like, I mean, this is not a great gauge for it at all, but I mean, sometimes during lunch, sit down, play CrowdStrike 1.6. Suddenly there's a ton of high school kids on now and they have to pause in order to like answer a question for their teacher, which slows a
well, let me
down.
ask you on the topic of brokers. I mentioned this one broker, Moses, that we've been tracking a while now and sort of trying to get a handle on what they're doing. It brings up a question when I'm going through and looking at, you know, historically what they've been sort of responsible for. We've been able to kind of link back. I think we're up to about 8 or 9 different 0 days over the last couple of years that have been from this broker. The question of culpability or responsibility or ethics of being a broker, right, comes into play because, for example, we see multiple exploits from this one broker ending up in hands of different APT actors, for instance. We've got at least 3 different actors across the globe that we know have utilized exploits from this one broker. So the question becomes, who's responsible, right? If you're providing this sort of weapon, if you will, to an actor, what happens in the next SolarWinds incident, you know, when you have this huge thing that happens and a broker is the source of that exploit? Should they be held accountable? Is that something that we could even do? I mean, it's a big question. It's been around for ages, I'm sure, but curious on your take on that.
Yeah, definitely. So like, it's a super complex issue, but it also comes back as well. Like if we're still like have trouble with like just even dealing with like, you know, dark side, like do we extradite them? How do we hold them accountable for this? We're getting to the like next stage of accountability and trying to move past that. The other thing that's important as well, like even if like an exploit broker supplied some exploit which enabled some additional action, I don't feel that negates the responsibility and the fault of the actor themselves. So the actor is still 100% responsible for their attack. This is now another party responsible. So in no way should responsibility be shared. I mean, is like,
go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is like, if we want to pursue down that path, we need to have like a set of like agreed upon rules at a like very global scale. Because right now, if I posted it, like if I found a bug, disclosed it ethically, and then say posted the source code to GitHub just as like, hey, here's the POC for it, and somebody then used that and turned around and started an attack, like theoretically, I brokered that exploit. I was the one that found it, but does that make me then liable for its like actions? And then as well, it comes back to CobaltStrike. Like if somebody uses CobaltStrike, I think Help Desk Secure or Help Desk Systems owns the CobaltStrike now. So are they liable for its usage? So
well, Dave brought up a good question in the chat, and there are some laws, right? So we've got laws around, I think ITAR a little bit, the RICO laws, et cetera, that sort of like kind of handle, you know, actually selling an exploit, especially to parties overseas that are then used, you know. But there's another subtlety that we're finding, and specifically a couple brokers, if you will, that we know of. They sell, for example, root cause analyses as a report. They sell POCs or proof of concepts, right? They're not really weaponized exploits. And then what we're finding is these POCs, for instance, are being purchased by a potential customer of theirs and then turned around and repurposed third party for another customer of that customer, right? So there's a supply chain here that we're seeing where you're going from a broker who potentially is doing the right thing, doing within the laws, selling a POC of an exploit. That POC is being taken and repurposed and weaponized and then distributed out from there. So then it's like, who actually is responsible at that point? Do you know that this is happening with your stuff, right? So it's an interesting question. And that's where the laws get a little shady, right?
They get really shady, and I've been thinking about this for so when we earlier talked a little bit, like I started thinking really heavily about this, and truthfully I really wanted to come in and say that like I believe that like like if you're enabling these like actions, even if it's with the best of intentions, like it's still a gray area and theoretically should have more regulation or shouldn't exist. But at the same time, because the thing is essentially like, and the kind of like key point to it was like I was starting to believe that like perhaps like we could enable these to work better if we say require after 6 months of selling an exploit or something, or after finding an exploit you report it to the vendor. But I kind of hit a wall because I started also thinking to myself like, well, why don't these software companies become customers of these different companies that are doing this? So if you've got a company that's doing research into, I need to find a non-good example or non-like dangerous example, but say you're like looking into security of like Zivif web cameras. It's a small company, makes webcams, buy them on Amazon, they're pretty cheap. They may not have the money to like pay for these services as well. And so it kind of gets to one of these things like why I feel like you shouldn't compel software companies to become customers of these services. And it's a brutally tough area.
Well, and you kind of mentioned disclosure policy, right? So I did notice that a couple companies recently have actually updated their disclosure policies because of what's been happening, right? And they've explicitly come out and said, hey, we're going to continue to sell a feed of POCs or you know, reports or whatever, but when we find a 0-day 6 months after discovery, we're going to report it to the vendor, which to me, I think is a legitimate compromise. Or, you know, I mean, it's saying, hey, look, we have a valid business model here. We're selling things for defensive purposes or whatever you want to call it. I call it what you will. But either way, 6 months after that, we're going to report it to the vendor. Now, hopefully they follow through with that policy. I don't know if there's anybody actually watching that, but that gets into regulation and all the other fun stuff behind that. But I think there's a level of compromise there where these broker types should probably, if you're having a legitimate business doing this and you're above board, obviously the underground stuff, you know, throw that away. But for these businesses that are selling this stuff, I think having a legitimate like policy that you follow for disclosure would be a really good thing.
Yeah. And also, I mean, and this is a biased statement because tracking this stuff all day, I mean, I would like to see it even go even farther where if, say, for example, they find out that like a customer of theirs had been compromised or potentially resold it to someone else and they violated like a terms of service type agreement. Like, I would like to see even like a write-up and analysis of what happened and potentially where that may have gone from their side. Because like that can really help fill in a ton of like pieces for like my understanding and other people in my position where we're trying to understand how these ecosystems exist, how these different entities acquire exploits, how they're using them, and like what that process looks like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I find it hard to believe that someone who's operating a legitimate business is going to turn around and sell to multiple different actors around the world knowingly, right? So you have to kind of assume that there's this third party like supply chain going on, at which point probably should be looked at, maybe like you said, made public and say, hey, you know, this is where it came from. That's all stuff that none of us know about. Like most of us don't understand that community or that ecosystem, as you said. Yeah.
The thing also is we're asking them to voluntarily do some of these things. And the thing also is when I think about it, like any type of asking them to expose these things is always tough. And there's no incentive for it either. And so I think it would have to be something like regulations. And I also want to step back for a sec. I know even suggesting that they provide information about their customers is going to be a non-starter, which is completely understandable. But yeah.
Yep. It'll be interesting.
Idealistic dreams. Yeah.
And that's all just US, right? What's to say a company's not going to go to Cyprus or somewhere else and do the exact same thing, right? It's happened before. We've seen it with other companies. So. Well, Silas, I hate to tell you, but we're running out of time. And at the end, I always like to throw a couple lightning questions out. You don't know what's coming, so hopefully I don't trip you up too much, but just say the first thing that comes to mind, just to kind of have a little fun and let people know how crazy you actually are. So here we go. Crystal Burger or White Castle?
Oh, White Castle. I'm from Jersey. I've done that drive.
Okay.
And I've never had Crystal Burger, so.
Crystal's amazing. iPhone or Android?
Oh, neither.
Neither. Okay.
Yeah. Got to get my post-market OS phone.
Nice. Gossip Girl or Gilmore Girls?
Gotta get my Betty White.
Immunity or Ollie?
God damn it. I love Immunity and I love the Python bindings, but writing assembly and doing Ollie scripting, that's got a place in my heart. Like I love that.
Black Hat or DEF CON?
Always DEF CON.
Of course. Or B-sides?
I love B-sides too, but I can never get in. But I love that. All right,
ready? Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, or Sputnik? I'm Moderna, I think. I got a plug somewhere here in my office. And last one, Google, Bing, or DuckDuckGo?
Google.
Google all the way?
Yeah.
All right.
Google results are always top notch. Yandex too.
Appreciate it, Silas. Thank you so much. If you have time and you can stick around, maybe there's some questions at the end. But for now, we're going to sign off and turn it over to Mr. Denis. Mr. Denis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Brian. I'm here.
Okay.
Regarding the vaccines, you could also mention Sinovac. Besides Sputnik.
Can you share screen okay?
Sure.
Excellent.
I hope I'm still could share. So in this year, we have an update regarding the wild pressure campaign. Actually, now on the screen, it's our report from the 2020 regarding this campaign. But we decided to choose a little bit different form, not a presentation with the slides, who attacks who and how they come in, etc. I have two reasons for it. First one is maybe I'm a little bit tired of such kind of presentation through this year, which we've spent mostly at home. And second reason for it, I would name at the end of presentation. Now let us try to make it more like not a workshop, but showing way of automation of analysis when you have a batch of samples and you want to make it quick way, and even your operating system has some automation tools on board. Whatever, here we would have Linux, but on Windows you also could with a with a PowerShell, you could do all the same with the CMDlets. So what is all about? From the previous report, we know something about the config content. And I also want to obtain some data from the config in 2021. Most interesting for me is the URL, maybe also the encryption key. If it's interesting over trying to catch some traffic in case you could sinkhole these domains. By the way, in that case, it was possible. The domain was or to the analysis date, domain somehow was not registered on the operators, so we could do it. And what I remember what all this configuration data, they just put in a resource section of the PE files. Here, I had some bunch of files that related to this campaign. I gathered it using the Yara, so the change a little bit big. Back then, it was the version 109. Now, the most recent we observe in a wild nature is a 161 or 161, right? So they update a little bit in case of C++ Trojans, the class names, functionality a little bit. But the reason is I still can write Yara rule to catch the bunch of files. After it, I really don't want to open all of them in the IDA and to get the config data. I just want to stick to my command line. So I remember it was just a base 64 strings. So why not try to make it like this? Strings. A lot of unneeded stuff. Config is quite long. So why not to use one of the arguments? And now I have all the long readable ASCII data from the files, and some of them looks to me like base 64 encoded because of the padding with the equal sign. Okay, let me then try this one. Looks not long enough for the config, but anyway, I would decode it. No, it's just some script they keep in the base 64, some script to send the post request to the, not the thing what I want. Where's my precious config? Because it looks like I take all the long strings. Actually, no. Actually, we have another key for the strings. Remember, I mentioned resource section. So far, we are grabbing only from the data section, right? It's without the A key, with note our strings wouldn't take the data from the resources. And this time we add something, but I still didn't observe any long configuration data. The last thing I remember here, it's encoding. If I want to take not the ASCII 1 byte encoding, but also grab all the white strings, I would add one more key. And now I see very familiar thing. I see the sign on the start of the config, the end of the config, and the quite a long, probably base 64 encoded. I see the same padding between these two signs. And I also want to throw away all these VQL queries, like you see that are gathering all the installed antiviruses besides the default one with the VQL queries. And I want to grab a little bit. Let us take only VS32. And this time I see only my probably configuration data. So what next? Next, for sure, I want to decode it automatically. Yes, you could go to Cyberchief, but if you have dozens of samples. Here I have only maybe 10 of them. Maybe you don't want to click some buttons here and there or put in your clipboard. Let me try to make it right here in the terminal. So let me make a little AVC. With AVC, I would set as a delimiter this char. It would be the delimiter, and I would print all what is outside the closing bracket. So second line, because it not looks like this, it have to be like this. With the AVK print, let me check print, and I suppose my first syntaxis was right, but it just print. Syntax error. AVK to this. Now I could grab it without the first special characters for them. So let's call it an egg, like if we are speaking so much about the exploits today. So some egg in the beginning and quite the same thing in the end, but with a very minor change. Now I want to make this char like a delimiter and print only first one. Okay, now I throw away all the special with X from the resources. I got the config itself and I want to decode it. And you also could do it right here with my Python tree. I got it, well, it's by default. It's not installed separately. JSON tools. JSON Python tree, and let me take a look. I'm quite sure it's here. JSON tool. Value line common. Let me run it first without a Python. Looks legit to me. Python 3 is here. And then model. JSON and tool. Let me take a look. Some effect when you're presenting online. -m JSON tool. Okay, then I would show to you it like this. Would just take it. Let me try to take it in buffer and put to the echo to the Python because it works smoothly right today. -m JSON tool. Maybe my ask throw away something. Sorry for it. Okay, don't want to maybe don't want to do a debugging now. Something is working with the AVK.
Dennis, folks are saying you're missing the base 64 decode before the JSON.
Sure, thanks, Brian, for sure. Now let me return all this AVK lane for sure, because first of all, you have to decode, and only after it, you could use the Python model. So JSON tool, now it have to be, yep. Now I have, so let me show you without beautification with a Python. You would get the same JSON, but you also have to bring it to the cyber chief, whatever. And with the JSON, you beautify it right in your command line. Thanks, Mr. Brian. And after it, I still remember I have several files, right? And I don't want to use Xarks to put this result for all the files. I would just do a little bit of a shitty coding, and I put right the same command to get the configuration data, and after it decode it with one after another in a cycle. So it would be so it's a wild pressure. Great ideas. And here with a get config, sh, I would get all this stuff I need, and for example, after it, could grab all the URLs out of it if I want. So it's up to you to go to the to one file, and after it make it sort unique from this file. So all your automation is right here. For example, if you are wondering what user's ID they have in the malware, it's most probably the similar user ID belongs to the similar target. Most probably, if I were them, I would encode one target with the one client ID, but I'm mostly for the URLs to tag it, to add it to our data flow. So this is some very basic automation. You actually need nothing besides your command line. But what else besides these new samples I showed here, what they do besides the updating of the C++ malware from the version 101 to 161, it was one interesting field in a C2 communication in 2020. It was, back then, I was wondering why to keep the language in which they develop this malware, even in communication with the C2. So the theory was, the most probably they have another version of the same Trojan written in another language. And true this time, we were able, once again, using Yara, using all the hunting stuff, to obtain the version in a Visual Basic script, not in a C++. And let me show you how it looks like. The version with the Visual VBS looks like this. So some encoded blob and some small decoder in the beginning. Actually, if you beautify it, the decoder is quite a simple one. It's creating the function which is just XORing with a key and calls this function. Here's a joking. Let me do it like this to show you, and calling this function with the constant 68. So if we would analyze all this decoder in the start, it's creating HTML from the object HTML file. It's taken two chars as a hexadecimal value, next to chars as a hexadecimal value, and store it with a decimal 68. What you could do in this case, for sure, you could just use your some also simple script to decode it with a unhexlify and just dexor it. So now I just put this part, this blob from the Trojan to the encrypted file, and this simple script would provide the decrypted one. And we also would reuse, you would see, if we would take a look at the next stage and the decrypted, in a decrypted one, let me make it Visual Basic to highlight it. We could even reuse it. So our precious new domains is here. This time, to me, it looks like hacked, one more time, hacked WordPress legit sites to put the PHP server path over there to communicate with such a VBS Trojan. And also here, if you see it quite long, it's around 1,000 lines long. And if we would bin to hex file, hex to bin, we would see some comments over there, which also is encrypted. And the algorithm is quite the same. The only difference is a constant. If we would go to this function, we would see the constant is 110, and you could reuse your script to decode such values. So I'm just standing for using all these local tools, local automated stuff, because in my opinion, we are buying some tools from the outside, even web-based tools, but not fully use the powerfulness of our operating system. There's so much embedded in it. And in case of this analysis, we could do a lot with the embedded stuff. And so far, we don't even touch Miss Ida. And let me also show, let us just decode one of it. And after it, make the decoding with the IDA Pro plugin as well. So I would take this argument of hex to bin, go into my script, and this time I just need to with unhexlify, not to reading from the file, but just my. So just put it over there and dehexlify, and you would get, if you do so, you would get one more VQL query to the if we're using on Windows operating system to gather all the environmental data on the data about the infrastructure. But let me now run our Miss Ida to show you the how we could do the same inside the disassembler. Let me make it full path 2021 04 like this. And please, if you want to have the by default, Miss Ida wouldn't put the resources in your analysis. So just check load resources here. And while we are, so disassembler needs some time for the analysis, let me cover the second reason why we decide to choose such a format for the, speaking about the new development of the wild pressure. Lately, we have finished our online reverse engineering course. You could find it on xtraining Kaspersky.com. It's 10 tracks, each track about the different targeted malware, which we make from the easiest one to the hardest ones. And also we have in mind, and I really want your feedback here in chat, we want to just add to it from time to time, not the new big track to the training, but some screencast from the reverser to how they do his daily job of analysis of targeted malware. Maybe not that simple, maybe not the strings utility, whatever. But imagine in the same case, but your configuration data in the samples are encrypted with a triple key, which is under RSA key. It's a real case. It's a real case. It's a Monty 3. It's one of the track in our xtraining. And also, you could automate the same in your command line with using OpenSSL. And the some 45 minutes video screencast like this could be like an additional addition, which with a new targeted malware to this training. And I wonder what you as a community thinks about it. Do you need such an additions? Would you watch it? So IDA is done with the initial analysis. And besides the creation of the invisible window here, it's also calling this function creating of the invisible window in a new thread. It's a main function of the malware, a lot of the initialization of the strings, initialization of the configuration data. And here you could see even the version of the malware put it in a corresponding string. And here with we could observe some RTTI data. It's still on board. I think on some stage, maybe in version 2.0.1, it would be thrown away by the developers. But so far, we could enjoy RTTI data. And right in the R data section right here, I see one more encrypted data this time not in form of the script in a binary form. I could check the cross-reference to it, and I see another, so they still use a very simple decryption algorithm, just XORing with a D2, but this time with a C++. So, and let me show you the function of our plugin. We have plans in future to make it open source. We are thinking about it. It's just decrypting. So the length, it's automatically setting here, depends on the length of our array over there. All I have to do to set a key, it's just a 1 byte, also an option 2 bytes, 4 bytes, different algorithms. Mine is just a simple XOR. And after it, I could page with the bytes. Yeah, I prefer to make it a comment. And one more VQL query is here. So just during the fingerprinting of the targets, they're using VQL to get the serial number of a physical media. So this is it. I think it's I'm almost out of time. Let me sum up a little bit. So I really want to get your feedback. Is it useful or not to have some short, around 45, maybe 1 hour video over a live reversing of the malware we are after right now? And also, I hope all this automation stuff maybe is useful for someone. It's just the way like I'm doing things. And this is it. And also showing you our plugin. I really hope we could make it public one day, our decryption tool right in the IDA. This is it. Let me check, stop the screen sharing and check for your questions.
Yeah, Dennis, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Let's see. One person asked, are there coupons for free attendance? I'm assuming that's for the X training. I don't believe we give it away for free, but
for free,
there's always a sample. Maybe do we have like sample labs that we can let people try? Or
yes, we have for you could try on the X training. You have a demo tracks for it. So far it was for free. It was one when we presented over there maybe a month or 2 ago. It was for the best question. We give it for free to one author of the best question to us. But now, sorry, it's yes, it's not free. But if you want to understand what is inside, please feel free to take a look at a video on X training site to understand what the content is.
okay. Another question, when will the string decryption plugin be available for us to play with?
You know, so far, sorry, I couldn't give you the dates because it depends. For we have to maybe publish it partly. So to first of all, to end the development of the public part of it and then publish it. So far, we don't have a precise date. Sorry, but we have it in mind for maybe for several months already, and I'm pretty sure it would be public.
In the X training class, do you cover reversing structs in IDA?
Reversing structures.
Yep.
Yes, we put a lot of, so mostly the questions are regarding the X training. Okay, quite predictable. Yes, in the X training we put a lot of an accent on decryption and on the creating of structures, because to my understanding, to be a successful reverse engineer, you have to understand the data structures. You see this function, I just briefly moved away to the encrypted data, creates the config. And config, it's JSON parsing, a huge number of fields. And to understand all of it, you have to create all these STL strings with a capacity, with length, all this dumb, okay, not so dumb, but maybe not the most funny work with creating the huge structures. Yes, for sure, we do it in a tracks or in a X training.
Cool. Question on wild pressure 2. First one, that's my dog ringing the doorbell. What do you think how advanced is this actor, right? They were pretty focused specifically on a very interesting region of the world. But then looking at how they obfuscate the config and how easily it is to kind of pluck this stuff out in an automated fashion, where do you think they fit on the scale of how advanced are they?
I think I got the question, and I think it's no, I'm not in a position to judge how advanced other developers are, but I could say I saw much more profound targeted malware. I saw in reverse much more profound. So, but anyway, like I tell it all the time, they don't have to be too advanced. They have to be advanced enough for their targets. So it seems like they're advanced enough, right?
Yep.
So far, they exist at least for the couple of years. So it seems like they gather something. No, I wouldn't consider this malware as extremely sophisticated. No, not at all.
Okay. And then there was another one I noticed in our old blog, you referenced version 1.0.1 for Milum. And I think you just showed version 1.6 something in the one you just showed. Is there any way that you might be able to post some hashes after we're done today of some current samples if people would like to take a look at the newer samples of Milum?
Let us just, after the, as usual, published as a secure list blog post regarding if there is interest in the community to this malware. Yes, for sure, the updates would be not only regarding the VBS version, but not only the new numbers in version of the C++ malware and the new name of the classes. By the way, now they didn't use Milum anymore. They just shortened it to M. Maybe trying to avoid some rules, I don't know. But anyway, also we were able to catch the new orchestrator and some plugins. Also, I could say quite not most sophisticated orchestrators and plugins, but anyway, some central part, and for the screen grabbing, one plugin, for the keylogging, another plugin. So yes, I think we could not only detect and provide all these domains, etc., to our clients, we also could cover it on a secure list. Why not?
Okay, good.
With the cache.
You heard it here. Dennis is promising another blog. So
yes. There's an interest. So interest in the X training and Milum itself. Good.
You got it. All right, Mr. Dennis, I think that's it for today. Please stick around if you can. And next up will be Boris. I believe Boris is doing potentially a pre-recorded workshop on some exploit stuff. So, Mr. Boris, if you're there, the floor is yours.
Yes, Brian, I'm here.
Okay.
So yeah, let's start.
Can you share your screen, sir? There you go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my workshop on exploit analysis. My name is Boris Larin. I'm a security researcher at Kaspersky GReAT. I'm focused on finding zero-day exploits. I do reverse engineering, I develop exploit detections, and do hunting. In the last 3 years, me and my colleagues have discovered more than 11 in the wild zero-day exploits. All of them were used in different malware campaigns. If you like to learn more about these exploits that we found in the past, you can check out my page on securelist.com. In today's workshop, I'm going to teach you how to set up your own debugging lab, how to use Windows Debugger. I will show you some useful tricks. And finally, I will demonstrate you how I analyzed the latest zero days that I've discovered, CVE 2021-28-310. Ability to analyze exploits is an essential skill in malware analysis and vulnerability research. I think that malware analysts should have a good knowledge about popular exploits and be able to recognize a zero-day when they find one. Malware analysts also should be able to recognize a CVE ID if exploit uses known vulnerability. CVE ID is a potent threat indicator. So in case if you see that attackers use some known vulnerability in the attacks, be sure to include this information to your blog post or report. On the other hand, vulnerability researchers can analyze the exploit, understand what the root case of this vulnerability, and help to find and fix other similar vulnerabilities. Scenario for today's workshop is that you are a malware analyst and you have discovered an unknown elevation of privilege exploit on VirusTotal. You need to analyze it and find the root case of exploited vulnerability. First thing first, you need to set up your own debugging lab. You need to set up a virtual machine with Windows 10 operating system. Quite handy that Microsoft provides images for different virtual machines. You can get an image with the latest version of Windows 10, and also you can get an images for older versions of Windows with different browsers like Internet Explorer 9 or 10. The next step is to get debugging tools. You can get two different versions of Windows Debugger. There is a WinDBG Preview, which is a new, sleek-looking version of Windows Debugger. It has some new features like beta scripting and also time traveler debugger support, and it just looks better. You can get it from Microsoft Store. There is also a classic version of Windows Debugger. It comes with Windows SDK, and today I will be showing you the classic one. Boot your virtual machine. You need to install Windows Debugger on your host and on your guest machines. So press next. Probably don't want to send this information. Accept. You need to install debugging tools for Windows. You need to install application verifier. And well, that's enough. So the next step is to set up your debugging. And many tutorials that I have seen, they teach how to set up debugging over COM port. Don't do this, it's extremely slow. There are better options. First of all, you can set up debugging over network. And there is also virtual KD. I will show you how to set up this. So in case if you're using VMware, you need to add additional network adapter, choose a host-only adapter, press OK. Then you need to get an IP address of your host machine for this host-only network. For VMware, it's VMnet1. So this is my IP address. Then go to your guest machine, go to control panel, go to device manager. Here you need to get PCI information for your network adapter. For me, it's PCI bus 27, device 0, function 0. Then open command prompt and do the following command. And also do this additional command. Here you provide that you need network debugging. You provide an address of host machine, debugging port, and also debugging password. Then you need to set up PCI bus parameters for your network card, which will be used for debugging. After that, you can restart your guest machine. So now open WinDBG on your host machine and press kernel debugging. Here you provide port number and password for your debugging machine. Wait until it connects. At your first launch, you can see the same picture. Like, it's hard to tell if it actually does something or not, because it says that kernel debugger connection established, but also at status you can see that debugger is not connected, and it kind of doesn't allow to do anything. You just need to wait, because at first launch it tries to download all required symbols. Just wait, yeah, everything is fine. So right now I will show you how to install VirtualKD. You go to VirtualKD website and you need to get it. Then you copy it on your guest machine. Go to the target folder and use vm install. So here you press install, but don't restart your machine right now. We need to check something. So there is a bug in VirtualKD, and sometimes it fails to install connection. So to check if it was properly installed, use bcd read debug settings. If debug type is set to local, we need to use one additional command. For VirtualKD to work, you need COM port debugging. When machine boots, press F8 and disable driver signature enforcement. Then open Virtual Machine Monitor if it comes with VirtualKD. If it says that OS is ready, press Run Debugger button. If you do this first time, it also will take some time to download symbols. Then you just press go and you're ready to do some kernel debugging. Right now, let's talk about Windows debugger commands. I'm not going to talk about all of them. There are too many useful commands and extensions, but I need to mention the most essential ones. I believe that some of these commands do not require additional commands. There is a quite useful command X. You can use it to show debug symbols in different modules. The process command, you can use it during kernel mode debugging to display a list of all processes, or get your current process, or find some process you are looking for. There is also process command, which is used for process context switch. WinDBG also supports its own expression language, which is very useful. Here you can see commands that you can use to display memory contents. You can display memory as bytes, double words, quad words. You can display strings. You can display memory pointers with symbols. It's useful when you debug some virtual objects. There is also very useful command display type. You can use it to display structures if symbols are available. So here you can see some breakpoints related commands. You can get the list of all breakpoints. You can remove some of them. You can set breakpoints. Here I also demonstrate how to set up a conditional breakpoint. You can also set up memory set breakpoints. I need to mention that it's possible to use expressions as command parameters. It's really useful to use this with conditional breakpoints. You can read more about expression language, which is used by WinDBG, by the following link. Here are some additional comments which will be useful for you. Preload user, you need to use this when you connect to user mode process from kernel mode debugger. fmatch x86, fmatch md64, this is what you need to use to switch your processor mode. And session, this command can be used to display and switch the session contexts. You will need to use this command if you are going to debug Win32k driver, for example. Let me show you why you need this session command. If you're debugging Win2K driver, this might happen. You see that code uses some valid kernel address, but if you try to display memory contents of this address, WinDBG is not able to show it. But at the same time, if you try to perform a step, you see that this address is a valid address, and code was able to read something that was located there. Win2K driver is located in some special address space. So to be able to read this data in WinDBG, you need to switch your current session. You can do it like this. Sometime you might need to set up a user mode breakpoint with kernel mode debugging. And to be sure that your breakpoint will be fired, you need to do the following. So first break into the debugger, switch processor mode if you need this. Then you need to get the address of your process block for your desired process. Then use this address to switch the process context. Then check if process context switched successfully, and only after that, set up your breakpoint. Let me demonstrate how to do this. So first I break into the debugger. Then I get the process block of my desired process. Let it be the tvm.exe. Here's the address of your process block. So then I use this address to switch to this process. It says that you need to press G for switch to happen. Now use this command to see if process was switched successfully, and it was switched successfully in my case. So right now I will make some breakpoint. I want to set breakpoint on process data function. There are 3 different functions with process data mask in DVM core, and I will set up a breakpoint on one of them. My breakpoint is installed, and we can press run. And my breakpoint is hit. Now, when we set up our own debugging lab and we learn how to use WinDBG, we can start with exploit analysis. Exploit root case analysis can work in both ways. You can analyze code path from trigger to crash, or you can first see the crash and then see how it was triggered. I usually start a root case analysis with the reversion of exploit code. My favorite way is to create a small proof of concept. Here are the ways how you can do this. First of all, there is a hex arrays. Then, if code is obfuscated or packed and you are feeling lazy, don't want to deobfuscate it, you can get a trace of executed API calls, system calls, and installed hooks with your sandbox, emulator, debugger, whatever you have, and then convert this trace to C file and compile it. Well, this is my favorite way. This is how I like to do this, but it's not necessary. Well, the thing is that during exploitation, the system runs very unstable. So if you stop exploit at the right time, you can cause a blue screen of death. You can use it to debug your exploit and find the root case. But for this case, I created my small POC, and right now I will try to run it. Well, I see that something happens. We don't see a blue screen of death, but there was black screen for a few seconds. I guess some process crashed. If we will go to Emmet Viewer, we can see that there was a crash. dvm.exe crashed. And also you can see exception code. It's access violation. So from here we can say that this exploit, it exploits vulnerability in dvm.exe process. It's a user mod vulnerability. Because it's a user mod process, we will need to perform a user mod debugging of a system process. You can do this from kernel mod. You will need to open gflags. It's a special utility that you can use to enable different debugging options. You can make your kernel debugger to break on every user level exception. It can cause a lot of noise. You will have to filter all of them. But I believe that for this case, it's better to use remote user mode debugging. For this to work, you need to start a debugging server and then use this command to connect to your debugging server from your host machine. Then choose attach to process and choose the process that you would like to debug. So we choose dvm.exe. So okay, we attached. Right now, let's start our exploit once again. Okay, we see that exception happened. So let's check call stack. Here we can see that exception happened in function channel delete resource that was executed from process message function. It looks quite interesting. So I guess exploits send some messages which then triggers this exception. We can see the what data is located here. We can see that proof of concept manages to write some object and it causes access violation. Okay, let's do this once again. Okay, well, dvm.exe restarts itself. It's quite handy. Let's attach again. And start exploit one more time. We can see that this time access violation happens in another function. And let's repeat this process once again. Press run and launch exploit. Okay, so this time it's another function. So you see that each time we run our exploit, crash happens in different functions. So how to find the real root case? Because we only see crashes after exploit works. So let's do something new. Let's enable full heap verification for dvm.exe process. Okay, page heap enabled. Right now we need to crash the VM process one more time. For heap verification to work, we need to restart the VM process. So for restarting, we will just crash it one more time. And next time it restarts, heap verification will be enabled. Okay, let's see what happens this time. Attach to the process. Press run and launch exploit again. Okay, something new happens. We see that this time we have a second chance exception. It means that exception handler of the VM process was executed. There is a special nil instrumentation handle failure instruction, and it was executed from C property set process set property value function, which was executed from process message process command batch. Okay, it's quite interesting. Let's execute it again. Maybe something else happens. Okay, so we attach to the process and press run. Start exploit again. And okay, so it's the same exception right at the same place. It looks like with heap verification exception happens always at the same place. So let's check what this code looks like. It's time to open IDA. Okay, here's the process set property value. And here is when fail fast is executed. There are two code paths leading to this block. Let's figure out which one of them is used. We need to set a breakpoint for before fail fast function is executed. So let's check it. Okay, I see that well, R6 is equal to C0, C0. Okay, I recognize this value in RPX register. This basic block is executed. So what happens before it? Okay, so this check happens. So this value is compared to something like it here. It looks like some count or ID. And in our case, R6 is equal to value read from undefined memory. It's quite interesting. Okay, so let's set one more breakpoint for this basic block. Attach to the process one more time. Okay, we set this new breakpoint. And run exploit. Okay, our breakpoint is hit. Let's dump values of some registers, R8. So I believe this is command that was somehow sent to DVM process from my proof of concept. Okay, and R9 points to value that gets written. So R8 is our command. I believe that we have full control on the things that it gets compared. E6, it's somehow read from this table. It's interesting because you can see that E6 value was not initialized. So before we continue with DVM core, let me show you the code that I have inside my proof of concept. Exploit uses just 3 syscalls from Windows to K. These syscalls are related to direct composition API. They are used to send some buffer with commands. Here you can see how these commands are created. They basically just written one after another. Looks like first word means some command ID, and then there comes command parameters. Each command has its own parameters. Let's try to figure out what these commands do and what parameters are. This is a function that processes buffer with commands. Process command buffer. That this function has a really big switch statement. There are 21 cases. Our commands should be handled here. Okay, so let's look for the command with ID 1. Okay, what it does. So for first case, it will execute function create resource. We can say that command ID 1 means create resource. Command 3. ID 3 means release resource. And then we also have ID 12. Let's look for it. So it's another function, so it was not found. Let's look, maybe it handled preroute to the switch. Okay, it's here. Okay, here's some logic. something else gets compared. And here it calls setBufferProperty function. Command ID 12 means setBufferProperty. Now we can rename these IDs in our code. So the first command is create resource. Second command is release resource. And our third command is setBufferProperty. I spent a few minutes on reverse engineering, and I was able to get the names for all command IDs. Here they are. Right now we can rename our commands. This command create resource, command release resource, and command setBufferProperty. You see that these command IDs do not match the ones that we have in our dump. So let's look for this ID. I believe it should be somewhere in code. Okay. And we have a number of functions found. Okay, so here we have property set vector 3, property set vector 2, property set matrix. I believe that's where command sent to the kernel gets converted to the VM core command. Okay, so what we have here. It's good to have symbols. Here, third parameter is a decomposition expressed type. So in our case, expression type is equal to 23. So what happens before this function? Get resource function. Its third parameter is mil resource type. What else do we have? For our function, it's a case 394, which is what we have seen in our dump. And it gets written here. So I guess was correct. Okay, we have seen this ID here, get resource type. So I guess this parameter means resource type. And here comes, well, it should be some integer. I believe it's a resource ID, so we can rename it. So the first parameter is resource ID, then comes resource type and some flag. We can assume that for all commands, first parameter is resource ID. Probably it's some another ID that it gets compared. And it gets read from this subset in that command. In our case, it's 23. And then, depending on this value, different logic will be called. So here, it's float, property set for float. Here we have vector 2. It's our case. Okay, another case. This time it's vector 3. So it looks like expression type equal to 23 means vector 2. And it gets written here. Okay. We can say that it's vector 2. Okay, what other parameters are? Well, this looks like some ID because it multiplied at 8 and then it's used to get some data from the table. And then data that gets read compared to this value. So this is resource ID, this is some other ID, and this is the value that gets compared. What we have next? As you remember, 9 points to value that gets written. So it gets here from our command, offset 18. So it's here. So this quad word is the value that gets written. We can rename it. What else do we have? So this is some ID. It's also used in this function. Here it's also used as ID. There are some another data gets compared. Okay, so it makes sense. Because this function is called setProperty, I believe it's a property ID for a resource. Each resource should have a number of different properties, and it's possible to set or update them. We checked what this parameter looks like in command, so maybe it's some offset for data, for property data. So let's change this. It's property ID. And this is property data offset. I will call it storage offset. So we have the last unknown parameter. And it gets compared here. It's a flag. Depending on this flag, it would call add property or update property functions. Okay, so it was the last unknown parameter. You can say that it's update flag. We know all the commands and we know all the parameters. What the root case of exploit is? It looks like this code doesn't check if provided property ID is a less than count of all properties assigned to resource. Here happens out of boundary access, and retrieve data is used for this comparison. For this check to pass, data after buffer should be equal to data offset that we provide. Then update property function gets executed. Here additional check happens. There should be expression type written to the memory after buffer. And then it uses our provided property ID to write our value past another buffer. And these two checks, they could be bypassed if exploit manages to spray the memory at the right locations. We were able to find the root case for this exploit, and that's all for our workshop. Thank you for coming. If you want to read the full write-up about this exploit, you can do it by the following link.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boris. We did have a couple questions. If you're
Yes, I heard that some folks from the chat had a bad video quality. Guys, I'm really sorry for that, but we will upload this recording today.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I think it's an issue with playing a video within Zoom or something, but yeah, we'll throw the original video up. Boris, there was a question early on. You had made reference to how a malware analyst might be able to kind of identify what CVE is being used. So for instance, instead of a 0 day, maybe they've got an end day. Is there a quick and easy way to kind of distinguish what CVE you're looking at versus having to know all the CVEs and dig in like you did? Is there a way that you kind of recognize them quickly?
Like, like the most valid way is to check where code crashes.
So identify the crash and then start searching on that function, for instance.
Well, that's the most valid way. Well, in Kaspersky, we use some other techniques, but I don't think that I can reveal them because attackers will start to use them.
Good point, good point. Other than that, I think, let me see, we've already referenced the write-up. Yeah, so that blog post, if anybody's interested, Boris did a fantastic blog on every little tiny detail on how that exploit worked. So please reference that. And can we share the hash or SHA-2 of that sample? I don't believe, yeah, there was a question about, are we gonna post samples that people can use? I don't think we're gonna post the POC, obviously. But the closest thing you're gonna get is probably that video as well as the blog post, I would assume. Boris, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, we can distribute POC because it's illegal in some countries.
Right,
we
right.
will have problems because of that, for sure.
Yeah.
We'll still researching this attack. Maybe you will have more information in the future.
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, just to throw it out there, I don't believe there's an example of this out there on BT. You're more than welcome to go look, but I don't think that is available. So if there was, then maybe I wouldn't have a problem posting a hash or something, but yeah, not in this case. I think that is all the questions we had for you, Mr. Boris. Raymond said, thanks, this was an awesome approach to the issue. And with that, I think we have time for any other questions before we sign off. I know we're kind of at the end here. But if anybody has questions for Silas, appears like he's still around, hopefully not sleeping. We've got Boris, Denis, myself. Feel free to ask anything.
You turn it on.
I don't see anything coming in. I'll give it another second or two. Denis, did you have any comments on the exploit stuff? You had mentioned it earlier.
You know, I think you covered actually my questions. I enjoyed your dialogue, so it all was covered. Do you know, by the way, we see here a debugger related question. How debug it to the Boris, I suppose?
Yeah, Boris, somebody says a dumb question. There are no dumb questions, but do you know how a debugger knows the type of address?
Well, debugger knows all the memory because it manages it with page tables.
Thank you.
Not debugger, I mean operation system.
I did have a question for Silas while he's here. Can you explain the amazing stuff you have in your background?
Which stuff are you interested in?
I see Win and T. You see Win T?
Yeah, I was with Silas actually when he got the Win T or however you pronounce it license plate. We were in Australia, right?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, that was in Australia.
Yep.
A lot of people got license plates.
Yeah, I have something really cheesy I can show. So I in general have a problem with like army surplus stores. And I found like this old, I assume it's a mortar tube, but it also coincidentally perfectly fits a bottle of Russian Standard. So
would you share it with someone or consume by yourself? Don't drink alone. Don't drink.
I mean, if you guys want to come over, I mean, we can tear it up.
Please invite.
Silas is Silas is notorious for having something hidden in his background. I think I see a picture. Who could that be?
Yeah,
I'll give 2 gold stars to anybody who posts on Twitter who that picture is in the background
and gets the reference.
We'll leave that as an Easter egg. But and then of course the Norse helmet is one of our favorites.
I realized it's missing the little like middle part for the top. My daughter had it up in her playroom for a good like 3 years and then got tired of it. I saved it from the trash.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Well, I think that's it. If nobody else has, that's Eugene in the photo. No, it's definitely not Eugene. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody sticking around. Thank you so much. We will hopefully have another great ideas session in the next maybe month or 2. We'll try to do another 1 or 2. We're going to try to stick with the regional format. So who knows, maybe the next one will be a paella version or maybe some sort of US cheeseburger version, who knows. But yeah, for now, thanks again, appreciate it. And everybody have a great day. We will post a link to the video shortly. Thank you.
Oh, goodbye.
Bye-bye.